You're muted.
You muted, Varsha.
I thought I unmuted myself. Sorry about that long introduction, everyone. Here we are for the second discussion of The Darkness That Comes Before, which is the first book of the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker, who I called R. Scott Bakker for a really long time. We are discussing part 2 today, which is chapters 5 to 8, and we have our usual group of friends. Mike, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yeah, sure. My name is Mike, and I'm a member of the PageChewing forum, and really excited to discuss part 2 with you all. I had a great time the 2 weeks ago, and just looking forward to it.
Glad you can make it.
Definitely.
Steve?
Sure. I'm Steve. I'm glad to be here. It's my third time reading this book, and I seem to pick up something every single time. So happy to be here. Glad to see all of your beautiful faces, as Carl said. And just been looking forward to it for 2 weeks. So yeah, it's going to be. It's always a fun time. So thanks for having me.
Cool. And Dan, who is also a long-time lover of the series.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dan. I am a big fan of the series. I've read it, 4 or 5 times, I guess. But I have a really bad memory, so I forget a lot of stuff. So it's always good to reread parts of it. So hopefully I can contribute some useful comments on it.
Nice. And Carl, who's currently engulfed in darkness.
Yes, I am here. No one can see it, but I am the darkness that comes before right now. I'm completely like pitch black with one little candle. Anyway, I'm Carl Albert. I am also a member of the PageChewing forum and an author of Epic Fantasy. My debut, Truth of Crowns, just came out earlier this year. And I'm so excited to be here, and I'm glad, Steve is not completely alone on being a rereader this time. It's good. We're evening, the odds a bit here.
We need to start drawing graphs of their poker faces when we do our predictions.
Get like a police sketch. Like we got what's going on here? Like
It's tough sometimes.
I'm impressed. I haven't felt like you had in our first chat like given anything away or anything like that. It's all you're good at keeping things mysterious. And oh my gosh, this book is mysterious.
Oh yeah.
The trick is like putting in comments so people that have read it before know, oh, I know what he's referencing, but also the people that haven't read it don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The code words.
Keep it interesting for everyone.
I feel like, Dan, you do that really well with our Berserk discussions.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. I'm impressed with Dan and Daniel, who we read the first read with. I had no idea. He didn't give anything away. It's really tough. So kudos to them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I also don't remember, especially like the minutiae of like the history and relations between people, all these lineages and stuff like that. And I've been reading parts of the history of Erwa sort of compilation book, whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, I don't know how people can remember this sort of stuff or how they pieced it together from the little bits scattered about in the books. It's quite impressive. So yeah.
Is there an official like world book or is this like a fan compilation of all the history?
From what I know, it's a fan compilation.
Okay.
Of the history.
Well, that's super cool.
Yeah. Did any few particular fans contribute, or is it just extremely crowdsourced?
Since the beginning, it's just one guy. Just one guy wrote it. I mean, he might be wrong,
kudos.
but wow.
Kudos to that one guy. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking how he did it. He must have been like reading it and making notes every single part that it was mentioning something. It's like, oh, this slots into this part and into that part, and then piecing it together. because there are certain things that I'm reading that I'm like, okay, I remember that little bit. I didn't know it was connected to that, or I don't know when this was ever mentioned, for example. I cannot recall, but I guess it was somewhere.
Or author interviews, information that was revealed outside the books, perhaps.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of extra information discussion on Bakker's website, and he has a lot of blog posts and there's a lot of people which are a lot more expert about it, going super in detail about fan theories and possibilities, and like, I don't know, it's too much for me. But if someone does want to go into it, there's a lot of material.
Oh, I love that. See, that's the stuff I live for. I love all the fan theories and like falling in to these worlds and just like getting obsessive about like the mysteries. And I'm not like a particularly good theorist, but I like reading other people's theories and having my opinions, you know, either pro or con the theories. And oh man, it's I love it. I love that in A Song of Ice and Fire. I love that in this series already, you know, that it certainly has that air of mystique and all of these, you know, passing mentions that aren't just like, they don't feel like they're throwaways, you know, like I definitely feel like there are some fantasy books where you get the sense that someone just said, oh, you know, the battle of Zeroth Tower, and that's just like some random thing that they came up with on the spot. Like with Bakker, you really get the sense that there's a real history, and not least because like he will reference things multiple times, and you'll like slowly see, you know, the world unravel and more of the story come to the fore.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if, Steve, you read any of that. Like, for example, I remember reading a while ago some of the, how do I tell you without telling other people? You know, in the second series, there are certain chapters which are like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah, there's a lot of those, yeah.
Well, there's certain chapters, especially with,
yeah, I got you. Yeah, I got you.
with polls. But there's some interesting theories about what those means and what it means in the whole series. And it can find like whatever we call it, something C's forums or whatever, the forums that discuss these things. But yeah, there's probably a lot more, but I haven't even seen.
I had a question, so I'm assuming, and I wouldn't want to do this, but we would, for those of us that are new to the series, we would not be reading the Irwa Bible or what have you. No, because I saw it was on you have it linked, I think, or somebody had it. I was like, that's interesting, and I was careful not to look at that, and I've been trying to avoid that kind of stuff, but
yeah. There's lots and lots of surprises. Do not spoil yourselves on anything. Resist. Don't take any chances.
Yeah, that was the advice that you gave earlier, Steve. So I'm trying to stick with that and not even Google anything. That being said, I mean, some of the stuff I guess I like to try to see if I can guess certain things, and then maybe I think today I went back to one of the chapters because I thought maybe something was revealed that we should have caught. And I will say there's so many names. There's many new characters introduced. Well, quite a few, and then many proper nouns. So capitalized, you know.
What?
And I my head was swimming a little bit there. I will admit. I don't know about others, but
what was the thing that you thought was the reveal? I mean, I think that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think in the last chapter of part 2, we learn about the plan of the Emperor Xerius. I'm throwing these names out there, and I'm sure we have 5 different ways of pronouncing them. But I think we learned that, if I understood correctly, that he made a deal with this other faction, and I don't remember which group they were representing, but I think the guy's name was Kalmamunis, and so that's the one of several leaders, or no, I think they're called named men or something along those lines. I might be getting confused with Abercrombie, but who went and led the first part of the Holy War, and I think they called them the Vulgar War or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed as though that was orchestrated early on in part 2, but I think then it was alluded to later. But so at the time I went back and made a few notes of that. So I may have gotten the names wrong or mispronounced them, but that's totally fine, I'm sure. So that was one of those things where I was like, oh, I wondered, you've kind of wondered what the motivation was but there was a lot of scheming going on in part 2 across the board, I thought. But I'm curious what others thought.
Is that Siren? Is that me, or is that coming from one of you?
No, that's me. I think
They're coming for Dan.
No, I live next to the hospital, so it's
okay.
a lot of sirens, unfortunately.
Oh, all good. I was just curious. I was like, it sounded so like lifelike, and I like was kind of in the distance, but not quite. So I was like, is that near me? Anyway. No, Mike. I think what you're talking about was an interesting, certainly political power play with the Emperor Xerius, that he basically just threw away half of their crusading forces because he wants to reclaim power from the Shria, which was such a we'll see if it pays off. I mean, I certainly have theories about how everything is going to play out in a very broad sense, just because I know this trilogy is based on the First Crusade. But that's a hell of a move to basically offer up a whole army as like a blood sacrifice to the enemy, really. It's I really liked the relationship, the nuance between the empire, what are they? Are they the Senian Empire is the old, like before, right?
Empire?
I think that's it.
Nanser?
Yes, the Nanser Empire. Yes, thank you. The Nanser Empire. I really like their relationship with the Kyanine group, that the Cayenne, that they had this ancient history. It definitely evoked, knowing the historical influences, the Greco-Persian rivalry, I think, was kind of what they were, sort of a similar relationship they were alluding to, which I thought was really interesting. And honestly wasn't something that I'd necessarily thought of even as a fan of the history of the Crusades. It's like, oh yeah, these the Byzantines, these Greeks have this greater history with, the Arabs and the Turkish, people further out there because of the Persian Empire and all of that. And this, going far back before the Abrahamic religions influenced things. And similarly here, before you had the 1,000 temples and before you had, all the prophets, a prophet for everyone, there was still this relationship between them, that's alluded to in one of the epigraphs. And I thought that was really interesting. And that the characters themselves sort of acknowledge that and have this more... They clearly hate each other, but respect each other in a way they don't respect the Crusaders, who they view as savages. And I thought that was a really unique, interesting kind of political dynamic to see in a fantasy story.
I think that does somewhat reflect, up to my recollection, what actually happened during the Crusades, to which the Byzantines, they wanted to use the Frankish lords for recapturing their territory, pretty much. But I believe there was a lot of conflict prior to that between Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity, right? I don't know if there was anything like the sort of what's it called, the indenture that it's called in the books here, right? Was there anything of that sort in real life?
Yeah, there was. That's actually true to history. It's pulled straight from it, where the Emperor Alexius Komnenos. I went and like revisited the Crusader history, like the First Crusade, after our last podcast, just to make sure I get like the details right. And yeah, he had the exact same sort of idea of this indenture, where like having all the Crusaders come and be like, we're going to give you the land. We're going to reclaim the Holy Land for you. And they were all like, no, we're going to reclaim the Holy Land because we want to, and we're going to take the spoils, and you're lucky if you get anything. And that naturally made him very unhappy, the same as it did, Emperor Xerius here. And I think the big kind of divergence, based on my understanding of the history of the First Crusade, was that the vulgar holy war that we saw here seemed to be driven by nobles in a way that it wasn't historically. Like, they do talk about like there are a lot of peasants kind of rising up as part of it, but like in the actual history, it was like literally like almost entirely like peasants and like very low like nobility, and driven by this guy named Peter the Hermit, which kind of tells you a lot about him, right, just as a name. And the emperor didn't want to like sacrifice the guys, but he actually did kick them out of his city and was like, go off, but don't fight the Turks because they will slaughter you. They are way stronger, they're way smarter, they're way better at fighting than you guys are. You guys are a bunch of dumb peasants. And they went and they got slaughtered. As opposed to here, where it was this like Machiavellian strategy, which I thought was an interesting a twist on things, that he was basically like, and not just a Machiavellian strategy, it's a gambit. Like Mike said, it's like interesting motivations here because it's a real risk. Like, this could easily blow up in his face, but we'll have to see how it plays out.
The scheming is the most fun part, though. I think of these, at least the first book is one of the funnest part, is like all the schemes between all the different characters and trying to outsmart them other people. Yeah, it does really give that feel of sort of like a very like a Byzantine court, right? With all these different factions, and all these lords which are coming there not expecting to do any of this sort of thing, just we're coming here to fight a religious war, not to involve in court politics.
One of the things that I
Absolutely.
I found striking is that the emperor and his, well, it's also his nephew and his mother, and they have an interesting relationship. Maybe we can talk about that later. But that they really don't care about the Holy War. I don't think they're not really in it for, they're in it for to reclaim their old land. It sounded like, and destiny. I think that word is used a lot, and that made me think of a little bit of Dune, which we talked about in the last time. But I just to say, like, I liked how the narrative is shifting quite a bit, and that you have so many different groups vying for power, and they're not necessarily doing it for the holy reasons, which is, to me, very realistic, right? Like, it's not just about converting people or evangelizing to a new religion. It's about power. I think that was my take on it, and that's, even though there were many names, a lot of the history, as you mentioned, and maybe if you had read the series, a lot of that would be setting off different light bulbs or what have you. But that was one of the kind of aha moments I had, was that this, because we learned a lot about the emperor and his family, and his advisors, and all of the kind of various agreements, or the different schemes that they come up with. But at the same time, they're within their own family group, they're the nephew is, we learn, is he thinks he's the smartest, and he thinks the emperor is dumb. But I'm not totally convinced. I wrote down, this is hubris to the nth degree here. And I think at the end, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but he does say he feels like a god, and there's all these, like, they're like getting aroused and things like that, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I talked enough about that, so love to hear from others.
Yeah, I thought that whole trying to steal the holy war from the one who announced it, I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, it's interesting that there was a historical equivalent sort of for that too. And yeah, I thought the groundwork at the beginning of the chapter of this part, it really played out very satisfyingly to the end, like of this part as far as we got. Because, I mean, by the end of chapter 1, I was wondering, who's on whose side, if that makes sense. Like the counselor, the Grand Counselor, is that his title? I don't know which side he's batting for. I was convinced that Sirius is being betrayed. And I was fairly certain that Skatos, is that his name? Skaos?
Skaos, yeah.
Skaos is sort of doing his own thing. Yeah. Like, he's basically, those old Grand Viziers who were the brains behind the throne, and he is to a great extent. And it feels like he's implementing his agenda through Sirius in the first chapter. But then by the time we get to the 4th chapter of this part, we realize that he's actually trying to undermine what he's up to. So there was so much to think about and wonder and predict and figure out. I thought this whole thing was really interesting. And also on the subject of the vulgar holy war, I thought it was particularly interesting, I guess, the play on fanaticism, where they're like, yeah, God is on our side, so there's no way we can't win. And Sirius is using that to goad them into going and fighting a war that he knew that they would lose. That also was very interesting.
Do you think now that Sirius is not going to get betrayed? Because you said at the beginning, it's like, I thought he was going to be, but
I think he is. I just thought Skaos was the betrayer. I mean, and he is, but not in the way that I thought. Like, I guess there is someone else goading. I have trouble believing that all of the grand plans that Sirius has laid out are his. Because he very much wants to believe that all the ideas are coming from him, when clearly they are not. So
it's really interesting you point that out, that maybe that there is clearly Sirius is influenced by people, right? And it's repeatedly mentioned that fear is kind of a driving emotion for him, but at the same time he does enact these very convoluted, complex political plans, which aren't the sort of thing I normally would imagine someone who's very fear-driven would do. But it makes you wonder, right? Like, what are the added influences, certainly among the people around him? Certainly, it seemed like in the past, Skaos was a big influence on him, and it seems like there's a rift forming there. Skaos, to me, was my favorite character. I was sad that he seemed kind of weak-willed, although it seems like his life is constantly in jeopardy, and that their court is so toxic doesn't even touch on. It's murderous. Like, that you can just get killed for just like looking at the emperor wrong is horrifying. And it's no wonder that they all have like a history of like terrible murders and emperors not living very long and different things like that, when they all like treat each other like that. But it's also getting back to the idea of like viewing the Northerners and stuff as the barbarians, and certainly we've seen some absolutely barbaric things from those people already. But these are people who are like constantly at each other's throats and murdering each other left and right, as if that's like some super civilized
sophisticated murder
notion.
you know?
Yeah, it's sophisticated. Exactly. It's like you looked at me wrong, or like I didn't like that one idea you had, or you argued with me too
Yeah.
much. It's like it is so childish and petty, and
Oh yeah.
so I mean, it is very like talk about the deity aspect of it. It is very Greek godlike. You know, that's like a lot of when you think of those kind of older polytheistic religions. That is like a lot of the stories you see, particularly in the Greco-Roman pantheon. Is a lot of hubris and just being pissed off about very small slights and then destroying human lives because of it. I wanted to rewind again, back to the familial relationships and the dynamics of the court, which I thought by far was the most interesting thing to me. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what you said about the Greek
you're muted,
stuff.
Carl.
Oh, yeah. Still muted. Oh, yeah. Oh, good. No, I did want to say, like, because you said it feels very Greek sort of thing. Don't you also feel a bit like the Nansra Empire in general? Also, the family dynamic is very inspired by, like, Ptolemaic Egypt, and that sort of, a bit incestuous sort of, and also some of them, in general, the sounds of the names are a bit Greek/Macedonian successor empire inspired. And I think, there are some descriptions which make it sort of like a mix between the Eastern Roman Empire and Macedonian Greek sort of aesthetic. That's how I imagine it personally. Especially the soldiers. I imagine the soldiers sort of like, because they're called legionnaires, I think, if I remember correctly. But from their description, I imagine them sort of more like Macedonian pike sort of felling soldiers, with a bit of Roman inspiration.
Absolutely. I know. I think that's a great point. And the weird incesty stuff definitely gave Ptolemaic Egypt that was. I was wondering, like, there were weird vibes at first, and then it becomes explicit later on. And I was like, the one thing I'm unclear on is if the prince and grandma did it, because he seems to find her really gross, like physically. He's like turned off by her age, and so I'm wondering if she molested him too, or if she didn't. And I don't know. We'll see. Maybe that'll come into play. But their whole dynamic is so weird, and I love it. I'm here for the mess. I adore the mess, and they're also terrible. They're just horrible. Again, Skeos is my favorite character of this group of chapters, period. Because I didn't love that he seemed to kind of just like give up really easily, but maybe not. Maybe he is working, schemes within schemes. But because the other characters are just so horrible, they're just terrible.
That's what makes them fun.
No, it's true. It's true. And I'm very curious. I was impressed by how Bakker continually pulled the rug out from under me with how I felt about where storylines were going. Like, I was convinced the Emperor was an idiot and was going to get his son killed. I mean, the former Empress like clearly makes a big point of that. But just like the way everything was described, I was like, oh yeah, the son's screwed. And then he sweeps the Scylvendi. And then you come back and like, is he going to betray the Emperor now? And like, oh, now there are other plans going on. It's just like, I was constantly surprised by the developments. And honestly, I expected the Emperor to just be like an idiot, because he really came across like an idiot to me at first. Like someone who thinks he's really smart. But he successfully did at least one major, having his son go out there and in one fell swoop wipe out one of their age-old enemies, like that's a big deal. Like that actually really can't be understated, especially given the holy war they're about to be a part of. So I have very conflicted feelings about all of them, particularly in relation to their competency, not so much their morality, which is, I do not have a very high opinion of.
No. One thinks he's a god, the other wants to be a god.
Yeah.
And they both betray each other at every turn they can. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that scene. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just
Carl.
gonna say I can't wait for one of them to like try to murder the other. It's gonna happen. Like you don't have them like constantly think about trying to kill each other and like never try to kill each other. Like something's gonna go down. If someone doesn't get to them first, I guess, you know, any one of them I guess could get like picked off. So I'm curious to see where that goes.
Yeah. I love the scene that you referenced, Carl, where Confas comes back from defeating the Sylvendi, and then he thinks that he has this whole big monologue about how he can, take Sirius if he wanted to, and then it turns out that he'd probably have lost big time if he had tried, because, Sirius knew that he might, or someone manipulating Sirius knew that he might.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier with the like constantly having the rug pulled out from under me, where I was convinced that the son was this total badass and that he was gonna, like, again, not a good person, but I was like, okay, so he's the competent one though. And then he ends up chickening out. And then not only does he chicken out, but then he finds out that his dad, or uncle rather, right?
Uncle.
Maybe replaced all his soldiers. I did wonder though, at that point I was like, okay, this is also convoluted. Maybe his uncle's lying.
Right.
And maybe that was just all talk and was just a way to kind of establish his dominance via like his personality. Because I don't know that we have it confirmed one way or another whether he actually replaced them all. And
I thought
So
he did, because I thought he said something like, "Oh, I don't recognize these soldiers." Something like, I thought he said something like that.
okay, if he does, then great. And I just missed that. But yeah, no, they're definitely having me question, I guess,
Yeah.
the moral of the story, everything that happens and like what's real and who is actually going to be like effective.
But I think that's a good.
I mean, that's the biggest thing.
It's a good point to realize now. Like, the characters are not just like one-dimensional. Sort of, they're just one thing. They're just competent. They're just pathetic. They're just fearful, right? Like, they can be a lot of things at the same time, which makes them a lot more real to me. They're not completely disgusting. They're not. There's some good. There's some bad. Mostly bad, but they're not completely
With
useless.
these characters, at least.
Yeah, but also the world they live in is not a very nice world, right? If you're a nice person in that sort of court, I don't think you're going to survive long, right?
Right.
I think
So if you're not constantly scheming,
another character to me, which is another example of this. So the barbarian Nair?
Nair.
Nair.
No.
How do you guys pronounce it? I don't know. I say Nair.
Sounds good.
Neor?
Saying
It starts with a
Kanyi.
C, so
I was,
um,
I was pronouncing the C. Kanyi.
so I mean, a lot of bad stuff happens to him, and I actually wanted to comment on two things. Well, one is that I was sympathetic to him initially because of he suffers a pretty bad loss, and I think pretty much was left for dead, or I assumed that initially that he died, but quickly thereafter he's being picked over by looters or what have you. People, that scene was something else. I thought that was an excellent scene where people are like scavenging bodies, and then he's kind of just lying there. But but my point is that we learn that he's a very vengeful person, and I mean, I guess you can kind of understand in that world that is the way, and then he kind of had to, I guess they do touch upon how that's part of the Skilvendi culture, and he's the chieftain, so he had to kind of show his people, that he is like all powerful, because he basically kills the dude who betrayed him.
And his whole family.
And all the children, and it's an apple that hits me in the chest. No, it's a child's head. It was a bummer. And
that was freaky. That was great.
I mean, the imagery was something else. I I meant to. This is another one of those where I was like, okay, because I think it was Carl. You were mentioning how, Confus defeated this group of. They're like pastoralists, I believe, or they reminded me of the Dothraki, somewhat.
Yes,
but we learned that, in my understanding was maybe got a little bit lucky because they had factions within their group, but now I was wondering, because my understanding was that some of these different fighters within the Skilvendi kind of betrayed Nyur, but I wasn't sure. I might be blanking on how that happened and whether that was orchestrated by Confus or whomever. But I was just wondering if anybody understood, or maybe we don't know what happened there.
Was it his uncle too?
Was it?
Was it? Are they related, or am I making that up? I may be pulling that out of my butt.
No, I think there might be something there. I think. I don't remember exactly.
It is the other guy in his tribe, right? Who was
his uncle betrayed
It's his
him.
uncle.
I thought it was. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right.
So he says that he was there the night Nayur's father died, and he saw him. I remember it because he says, I saw the way you looked at him, it was like you were in love with him, and I thought until we got to the last chapter that he meant his father, and then turns out it was Moengus, but so that's who betrayed him, but I don't remember how he got betrayed. But do you think that the other chieftains would have listened to him if he hadn't been betrayed? Because he was sure, I feel like they would have overruled him anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because that's just not how they think about the battles.
I think the whole structure of that narrative sequence, is like structured in a very sort of predictable way. As in, you have your barbarians which follow tradition, and then you have a person that goes against tradition, which is right because he sees things which other people don't see because they're blinded by, again, their own traditions. But the smart person sees it, it tells them, but they ignore him, they make fun of him, and then it goes badly, right? The whole structure is very classic, and you're led to emphasize with the smart guy, in this case. And then it's interesting how it turns, because when he goes back, he's like, wait a second, I don't like this guy anymore. He's not a good guy, really.
No.
Right? But it is interesting how
Might be the worst of all we've met.
Yeah, he is like the archetype of a barbarian, right? But he is smart. He's like very smart. He seems to be thinking not in a way that, the usual barbarian meathead would think, right? And we get a lot more of his emotion, and that's not how a lot of times the barbarian archetype is portrayed in literature, right? He's portrayed as, a sword and sorcery man of action, right? Not as a man of introspection, which we do get some of that, and I think there's going to be some more of that in the future. Do we get in here like his title?
He does say
what he calls
something.
himself.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I don't remember.
The chieftain?
I couldn't. I was searching my notes here. I couldn't find it.
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler.
Well, I think I know what you're referring to. I don't think he specifically gives him has a title, but he does talk about killing the people who betrayed him and their whole family. And you mean Reaper? Is you talking about Reaper?
No. I think it's not a spoiler, but I think he calls himself all the time like the most violent of all men. And I think I think that's one of the most amazing sort of titles, or the sort of feeling that it makes you think about, and the image that it portrays. It's so, I don't know. Nyur is one of my favorite characters. Nyur and Confus are two of my favorite characters. But they're not good characters.
No. They're not likable, but they are very interesting characters for sure.
I think on the idea of like him being this classic barbarian type, but like taken in a different way, you know, with more nuance and stuff. The thing that particularly stood out to me on that end was that he had his cowardly moments, where you could even say that they were shrewd, right? That it was intelligent, it was smart, and I think that would be reasonable, to be honest. But that he didn't stand up and like try to kill Confus. You know, he thought about it, but he was like, no, I'm going to stay here. And it made an interesting parallel with him and the Emperor, I thought, first of all, because these are two characters who, to me, were very strongly driven by fear. I think there is even like moments where the other tribesmen like call Confus and like tell him he's like being a cowardly, you know, particularly when he's trying to talk them down from going into the battle. So I thought that was interesting, the parallels there. I hated him from the get-go. Like of all the cast, I don't know why, but Nair, I instantly did not like him, even though I thought the rest of the tribal people were clearly like huge idiots. And he was by far the smartest of at least the ones we met so far of the Skilvendi. I think I have my own biases against the like barbarian archetype. And it takes a lot for me to like, for them to grow on me. Like, I think I really like a sense of humor, particularly like Karsa Orlong and Logan Ninefingers for me are like, I love those characters. And I haven't gotten that emotional reaction to him yet, other than disgust with how he is the most violent of all men, right? But I guess that didn't even like stand out to me particularly because everyone here is like horrible and violent. I'm not everyone, actually. We had one nice character who died, who was my sweet boy. And we'll see how all the other ones turn out. But I did find in general that this section was harder for me to get through. I don't know, partially because there were a lot of names. Like, it felt denser in a way, you know, like it wasn't as much of like exploring the same stuff. Like, it was really expanding the world quite a lot. And particularly with the Vulgar Crusade, all the little lords they introduced didn't feel like they were fleshed out enough for me to like differentiate between them, so I struggled with them. And then when they just like told in a very broad swath, in a very like kind of history book style of how the Vulgar history played out, it just I don't know, it felt like too much telling to me, and I think it's an intentional choice. Like, it's not like, you know, that's very clearly a style that Bakker was going for, and but it lessened the impact, I guess, of like what ultimately happened to those warriors. I didn't necessarily feel the scope of the tragedy as much as I wanted to. What I did feel, though, was that Confus is, I can't even begin to describe his like personality issues, but I love it. I do love Confus. I think I love him in a like he's horrible way. But that's true with all of these characters, especially all in the Imperial Court. I just love it.
I think maybe Akemian is kind of not that bad, you know, compared to everyone else. I think she's been nicer one of all of them.
Absolutely. No, he hasn't done anything. Like, he just seems, you know, like kind of a bit of a, like he's a little gross in the way that, like, you know, someone we would view like from like, you know, the medieval ages, but like he's relatively like moral and trying to do right, at least, as opposed to just being out for himself.
Oh. Lost him.
Oh, he's
and Esmenet yet has not lost me. I don't know if she's
Esmenet for now is
Esmenet
pretty nice.
For now.
Well, it could change, or maybe not, or maybe not. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, all these characters are gonna, you know, we're gonna delve a lot deeper into their personality for most of them. And it's not gonna be like, oh, you know, just a little bit deep. It's gonna be like, you know, for a lot of them, what is like their whole personality, you know.
Right. Okay.
It's gonna be a lot of discussion on this.
Have you met most of the cast at this point, or does it keep adding different POVs based on the story?
I don't know how much we should say there are more characters, but
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple important characters I think we're still. Yeah. I think.
Okay.
yeah.
But stuff
enough.
like I don't know what your opinion are on like Kellis. But
Callus, I'm neutral on, and I'm expecting to dislike him very, very much.
yeah, like from what we've seen, like he's not. I don't know. To me, he doesn't feel like a character. He's not a character up until now. He's more like a robot sort of thing, right? He's more like a force of nature, an animal, something that happens, right? It's not.
Yeah.
You don't think like, oh, what is he gonna do? What is he feeling? What are his emotions? What he's gonna decide based on, right?
Yeah.
He's very cold,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, he's intriguing. Callus is very intriguing, and I'm shocked that. I mean, this is was a big topic of discussion for us in episode 1 and part 1 that I think we should definitely revisit. Is like, have we seen more Kellis? Like, I didn't get the vibe that he was any of the characters we've met, but I'm shocked that we haven't seen him if we haven't. I still like the theory that he's maybe Mathanet. I don't know if the timeline works out there or not, but that to me was an interesting theory that I have like kept my eye on as I've been reading. Because otherwise, I just feel like I'm just shocked that he hasn't like come up more, considering he was like the central character of the prologue, and I know he's major for the series as a whole. So I don't know.
We also didn't have any Akamian. I don't think his name was mentioned in part 2 at all. So I found that interesting. It seemed like part 2 was kind of a tonal shift, and I would agree with you, Carl, in that section where there's just a lot happening when they're describing, like, I mean, I actually highlighted the section, but and a lot of the names that were given, I was like, I'm just going to let it wash over me. Like I'm just like, I think Marcia, last time you said the names, I just kind of buzzed through them. And it
starts with the same letter, same character.
and it's fine, and that was fine. But I just felt like a little bit taken out, or a little bit less immersed in the story. But I think a lot of what Bakker is trying to do has purpose. I'm trusting him. But there were sections where I was like, oh, when are we going to get back to, these other characters? That being said, I did start to like some of the characters, and maybe I should. It's bad to admit because they are not the best people, but that's maybe how I am. Something wrong with me, but like I kind of like.
We like reading about them.
Yeah. I kind of like the Nair guy. But I'm maybe partial to barbarian kind of, types, or I don't know.
I feel like maybe those parts where you guys were getting bored, I guess, with a list, this guy, son of this guy, or this guy came with his retinue, these lords, and stuff like that. I think that part is supposed to harken back or be like an homage a bit to classical poems, or for example, even just like in Tolkien, right? You get when the reinforcements come to Minas Tirith, it's like, oh, this lord with his retinue of these soldiers came from this land, and then this one is the whole list, which again is also a reference to like what's it called in English, war in Troy, what's it called, Greek Iliad. Before the Iliad, the Aeneid.
The Aeneid comes after.
Oh, the Aeneid comes after. Well, anyways, yeah.
It's
Sorry.
the Iliad, the Odyssey,
Iliad.
and the Aeneid are the
Yeah, you're right.
trio.
I confused. No, you're right. The Iliad, yeah. I think it's supposed to be sort of like that, because there's also like a long section of like the list of the lords that come, and then this motif is repeated in a lot of works in later medieval literature, right? So it's supposed to be a bit like that. It's supposed to be. That's how it makes me feel. Sort of like it makes me think of an epic, classical framework sort of story.
Definitely.
But, it's not the kind of literature where, if you read like old literature, it feels a bit off and it feels a bit weird. But to me, it fits into this because this whole thing has a very ancient feeling. So I do like it, but yeah, I can see how it would not be very gripping.
I think for me personally, it was just that I wanted to get back to like the characters specifically, because I'm very much a character-y reader. Like I latch on and I'm like, I'm ride or die. Like I want to see these, even if they're terrible, right? Like I'm like, I want to follow them to the ends of the earth and see where their story goes. And, if I want them to die horribly, then great. I'm excited to watch that happen, and when it was just like, pages and pages and pages, because it wasn't just like a briefing, like it went on for a while, which again I think is a totally valid and it's a very interesting approach. And I'm with you that it's like it is evoking, as the whole story does, like you said, the sort of older kind of classical style of storytelling and fantasy, just through a really like horrible world, which in many ways reflects reality, so certainly beyond even some of the details, but yeah, it's cool, it's interesting.
I think we needed a bit. Yeah, I think this part was like you needed a framework to be set up for what's going to happen, I think, because otherwise a lot of what happens after would be a bit confusing, I think.
I wanted to touch upon...
Do you mean that in terms of like, I mean, obviously I don't want to get into like spoilers, but in terms of the style of writing?
No, not the style of writing.
Like,
it's
the characters,
the political landscape in which these characters are living in is useful for what's going to happen after, because it tells you about why they do certain decisions and why things happen in certain ways.
Gotcha. Yeah, I enjoy that. I'm enjoying the politics, definitely, all the scheming, the different schools and dynasties and things like. I'm very intrigued by all the schools. I continue to be like, I want to know more about all of them. I'm like, particularly I think because, well, one, it's magic and so it's cooler, and then two, it's not history. Like that is something that I have no idea where that's going because there is no equivalent. And so I'm like, I want to see, like, what's their deal? What's their history? We've seen some, like, a decent amount from the Mandate, but, like, the rest of them are all still very mysterious. And certainly the Mandate still has its mysteries, too. But, oh, man, I can't wait to dig more into those. And I know we will, because it's just such a distinct, unique part of the world.
Watch out for the sparrows.
The sparrows.
Oh, interesting. So, Steve, by this point, did you think differently about any characters during this read than you did the last time? Or
yes, but I can't tell you who and I can't tell you why. But yeah,
Can
there's
you
some...
say it in a way that I'll understand by they want.
Oh, good. Riddles.
There were behaviors that I didn't notice the first time. That I think it's almost impossible for you to know on the first read. You just won't know. But on a reread, you'll know. Like there's certain tells that stand out. Like, oh, okay, I see now. Kind of like little things, nothing major, but yeah.
That's so cool. I love that. That's one of my favorite things, when you have those elements of like foreshadowing and intricate like little character details that you go back on a reread and you're like, oh my God, like look at what he was doing here. Like that's awesome. That's a sign of a great writer.
You're trying to figure out when that thing happened in the background that is then later revealed. Is that what?
Yeah, because when we finished the series, when Daniel and Katarina and I were talking about, Daniel said, remember in book 1 when this and this happened? He's like, remember that? And it's like, oh, so now when on the reread, I'm like, I have to find those things that he talked about. So I was keeping my eye out for it.
So Dan, were you part of the other read along?
No,
so
I listened to
this.
it. But...
Oh, okay.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
I wanted to touch upon something that you mentioned, Barsha, because I didn't catch that, or I just missed it. Youth. So yeah, we learn about Nayur having this relationship with another man, and but you said it was Moengus.
Yeah, I think the slave, so I believe what happened there was that Nayur allowed the slave or helped the slave negotiate a situation that would, make him challenge his father to some sort of duel, and his father died in that. And the slave who challenged the father was Moengus. Anna Surimbor Moengus. And then I had to go back and look that up, and he is Kellis's
Right.
father, who should be in Shime at the moment.
We learn about that through like a flashback type of thing, right? So
Yeah, the last part of the 4th chapter.
Nayur is quite young at that point, I think.
30 years before the
So,
events,
okay.
I believe.
That's why
He was a
maybe I missed.
teenager?
I think he was
Early
14, so that's why I'm kind of
Yeah.
maybe missed that.
Yeah.
But thank you for pointing that out.
He was like 16 or something. I distinctly
Okay.
remember that you could like do the math, and he was something like that, like right around 16, maybe 17 or something.
Oh, interesting. Was his current age mentioned? I completely missed that.
There was something. I mean, again, maybe it's possible I'm making this up, but I just remember distinctly stopping at one point and like trying to do the math because they'd given us a number of dates, and coming up with that he was like 16 or 17, which maybe they just say that. Maybe I didn't do that. I don't know, but I'm like pretty sure I like have this memory of that. And yeah, I thought that was interesting too. I also, like you, Varsha, the first time I read it, and I actually reread it multiple times to make sure I was understanding it correctly, thought he and his father had a relation, or at least that was the rumor. And I still think if I went back, I'd be like, this is written into, I don't know if that's intentional or not, or if that was like a slip in the prose, like where he was like unintentionally being too vague. But it was really interesting to find out the thing with Moengus, certainly. And it definitely doesn't seem like they actually did have a sexual relationship, because when we're in Nair's head, he doesn't think about it like that.
Yeah.
But it's a weird, interesting dynamic there. Definitely, that was the thing that I was most intrigued by in that storyline, that whole history.
But it keeps coming up. So the other, the guy that he basically murders his family, I think mentions it, and then it's mentioned when during the battle, I believe. So it's, kind of a big deal, I think. And I keep wondering then, so what does that mean for Kellis, right? So maybe there's something to it, but I'm trying. I can't help but try to piece through. Maybe that's hinting at something, because what brought Moengus to those people? We know that they take slaves. So I'm just curious, what made him venture out and then be captured, or was there a plan? Was there some kind of plan? Because we know that the Dunyain are able to kind of predict what happens. They know what's happened based on what's happened before. So I'm just conjecturing, for the hell of it, that this father, became a slave, or maybe that's not the right terminology or what have you, but allowed himself to be captured for a reason. Hey, I'm just putting it out there.
No, that I thought the same thing for sure. That there's clearly he's scheming here. I mean, there's got to be plots within plots going on with Moengus and with that whole storyline. I mean, there's just no way, right? Like why did he reach out to his son after decades of being away? Like there's so much going on there, and it's so interesting, right? Like, because there's so much we don't know. So it's like we're just like throwing darts everywhere. Like, we have no idea, right? I am convinced, however, and this is only a theory, this has not been confirmed, but I am convinced that Moingus for sure did the Dunyain little, not actually psychic, but like it basically functions as if he was psychic, mind trick on Nair. Like the Nair like basically fucks over his dad, and like, I mean, certainly it seems like that's like a thing that could happen in that world and that civilization, but to me it's like, it seems like that it doesn't take a lot of stretching to imagine that Moingus, who has to be capable of the same shit Kellis is, used his little, trick on Nair to make all of that happen.
I mean, there's so much manipulation going on in this book that I wouldn't put it against the author at this point.
But I feel like I don't know, everyone else manipulation and then Kellis manipulation is a bit different. It's not the same level.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think.
It's like, again, it's almost this like psychic level of like, he is so extremely like capable of cutting through to people in a way that's like, it's fantasy. So, it's like, it's like creating this idea, like what if someone could do this, right? And he gets down, he like the way he describes in the prologue, right, is like he like cuts to like the core of the person and like their desires, like almost like the animal in them, and manipulates that to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
It feels almost cleaner than the other kind of manipulation. Like, I think one of you used the word robotic. Like, I'm trying to explain myself, but it feels less selfish and more just as a means to an end, if that makes sense.
Interesting.
Like less egotistic. I don't know. So since we're discussing Nayur's father's death, he says afterward, when his father lay dead, he had wept before the eyes of his tribe, wept with relief, which is very interesting. Why was he relieved that his father died? I don't think we've seen anything here to say that he wanted some sort of release from his father. Maybe that's a possible reason, but was it that Moingus was threatening him somehow if his father wasn't dead?
Or convinced him that his father was going to harm him. Maybe perhaps. He was like, your dad is going to turn on you at some point because you're a threat to him. You're the next in line, whatever. Just random another idea.
Yeah. He is also afraid that Moingus might die, which also is interesting, which could be, what you said, maybe, I don't know, could they control the thoughts? I forget if Kellis had, he could, right? He could change what people
It's not literally psychic. Like the way it's described is like, it's just like the most perfect form of manipulation, but it might as well be where like he can basically predict thoughts and actions and stuff. At least that's what he thinks he's capable of doing. Who knows if it's actually as perfect as he says.
Okay, so it's not, I think I confused myself with a different book, but it doesn't, maybe we need to understand what's going on there. That's a very interesting relationship right there. Also, all of this happened 30 years ago. Do we think that Kellis and or Moingus have been alive for a really long time? Because I went back to the prologue, because why wouldn't I after seeing this name? I saw that, the dreamers awoke as one, gasping in what? I don't remember what I saw here, but something that implied that the dreamers had been asleep for a very long time. I thought I saw that. Do you guys remember it?
I do. I thought I just read that as like they were just asleep and they woke up from their sleep and had seen Moingus telling them to bring the sun. Like maybe they were asleep for longer. I don't know. I don't think Kellis is that old, because I think they give us his age. Or unless, there was some frozen in time shenanigans that we don't know about yet. But Moingus knows. I mean,
was he like late 20s or something. Something like
It's
that.
something like
I
that.
think
Like I want to say he's. I mean, his dad left like shortly after he was born.
Yeah.
He basically didn't know his dad. That much is
Maybe
is clear.
early 30s.
So,
then,
however, yeah, maybe early 30s.
I get the sense that
Yeah.
they're not that much. I don't get the sense that they live that long or longer than the average human, I should say. One of the things though that I thought I noticed as well was it doesn't seem like anybody recognizes him or knows what the Dunyain are. So they're like this secret group, right? So I feel like when somebody ventures out, it's very purposeful.
Right.
To
No, we know they stayed hidden.
to
And that there was a line in the prologue about how they all forgot, like the world
Exactly.
forgot. 2,000 years passed and the world forgot.
Yeah.
Which adds to the mystique of the Dunyain. I love it.
Me too.
I can't wait to see them explored more.
That's why I wanted to come back to that, because I was like, well, that's got to be important. Like to me, like there's just no doubt that it's such a critical plot point, but I totally missed that relationship. So that's why it's great to talk in a group, because I'm sure it just enriches the reading experience.
Absolutely.
It is
I love
interesting and
hearing everyone's
fascinating
theory.
seeing how you guys, like, for now, you're getting, like, snippets of this, like, timeline. Like, we know what happened. You guys are getting, like, bits of it. And it's interesting seeing how you're trying to piece it together while we see it as sort of, slowly being revealed. And it gives a different, like, knowing what's actually happened and what you're actually instead seeing from what is being described is different. Gives different feeling, doesn't it?
There was one other scene that I really appreciated and enjoyed, and that, oh gosh, I had the names in front of me so I wouldn't mess it up. This is when Zarias, I believe, communicates with the Kisharim, or is it the no? Sorry, it's not that. It's the. Remember, there was a scene where he thinks he's meeting somebody, but then the face changes.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Craig, I had
The meeting with the Kyanine wizard, whatever, sorcerer, what are their names? They do the Sukkah,
Shisarim?
that's the name of their
I don't know.
magic.
Shusar?
Yes, that's them.
This
Yeah.
got him.
that they think they're meeting Malahet, and then it was somebody else, Scorus, maybe. Actually, there were two. Anyway, that scene was really. So that was another, like, we learned that. We learned in part one that there was this alliance with the Scarlet Spires, but then now we're learning that. This is the Nansur Empire is aligning with what we think are the opposing. I wouldn't call them bad guys because everybody is bad guys, but the opposing, Phantom faction. I just
I
thought
don't think they've done anything bad up until now, right? Have they?
they might be the good guys, actually. Yeah,
Which faction?
the
Phantom.
Phantom.
They're just minding their own business, aren't they?
Well, they do
Just protecting
annihilate.
themselves from the war coming their way.
Wait, is that the Cayenne? There were so many words for it. Are there? What
The
do we know
Chianine
the
Empire, yeah.
differentiation?
Mhm.
I think their religion is if they're just trying from a religious point of view, they're Phanim, but culturally they're Kianin.
Right.
Okay, cool. Thank you for clarifying that. That's right. Yeah. We know they did one thing, although we don't know why they did it, which was assassinate the head of the Scarlet Spires. Or did that happen in reverse? Did the Scarlet Spires do that to them? I think they did it to the Scarlet Spires, didn't they?
Yeah. That's why the
Yeah,
Scarlet
'cause that's
Spires are
right,
in the
'cause
war.
That's right.
Akka was talking to the guy who worked for the Scarlet Spires, and the guy told him that before he was murdered by Fleshface.
But I
whatever the
mean,
fuck is going on with
killing
that.
important political figure is not. I mean, who gives a shit? Like, it's not morally wrong, really, as much as like, oh, we're not persecuting people or killing innocents.
Well, yeah, fair enough. It's not certainly the degree. I think debatable depending on the political figure in
I
question.
guess.
But I guess we don't know enough about the Scarlet Spires, right? Certainly they all seem sucky.
They're having their
And
they're battling with we learned, I think, that they're more powerful. I think in the last chapter that we learned that they're even more powerful than the Empire.
Yeah, they own like more
Yeah,
land.
sure.
That was the thing that didn't click for me in the first part, was like just how much territory the Scarlet Spires had. Like they seem to have their own like full-fledged empire. Hyanon, I think, is like the territory, or like, yeah, that was wild. Very curious how that all works. I will say also, the Fanim, I mean, they straight up, unless they exaggerated, which is possible because people historically did do this a lot. But if they actually killed the army to the man, that's insane. Like the Crusaders, like not that the Crusaders didn't have something coming to them. Definitely they did. But that's like next level if they actually slaughtered them all. But we'll see, maybe not. That's certainly a thing historically that leaders will be like, we killed them all. We slaughtered everyone. We killed, every last person and pissed on their remains, and there is nothing left of them, and we salted the earth. Like, it's like, actually you just like killed like a tenth of their army and then they went and scattered. Who knows? But certainly that was we'll see. They certainly haven't done as much evil as, say, the Empire people we've seen. And we haven't seen the Scarlet Spires do anything that bad either yet, have we?
No.
Not really.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I mean, technically, all these people are preparing to invade another nation, which automatically puts them on the sort of wrong part, technically. Right?
Depends on what side you're on.
Yeah.
It's
true. I mean, I don't know. If I'm the one of the Shriel Knights, and I think they took our holy land, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're allowing pilgrims to go there, right?
No, I'm with you. I think clearly there's a decent piece going, and they're ruining a good thing.
Yeah, it seems very reminiscent of the whole Crusades thing, and like pilgrims were allowed to be there. There's a lot of other political reasons why we started. It's a lot more nuanced than just enemy religion, right?
Right. Totally.
Oh, definitely. There's a multitude of reasons, which again I love bringing in I feel like when people talk about the Crusades, they don't talk about the Byzantine Empire a lot. Kind of when people just like in pop culture and pop history. I mean, certainly if you dig into it at all, like even the slightest amount, you have to talk about the Byzantine Empire. But that is a whole other major party that isn't discussed at all, that had an enormous impact on how the Crusades played out. It wasn't just like, all the Western European Christians versus, all the Muslims, which, speaking of, by the way, they had like a bajillion different, empires and groups going on, where like it ends up being painted in these really broad brushes, which is just so far from the reality of how complex the political dynamics actually were. And I love seeing that represented, albeit in a somewhat simplified, but like, because you have to, you're telling the story, way, it's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of nuance going on here. That's fun to see play out.
I think most of the time, because the Byzantines didn't really go to the Holy Land. We were like, once we got to their part, we're like, fuck it, we're not going to go there, right? If I remember correctly.
They had in different crusades, they had more of an impact than others. In the first crusade in particular, they mostly just like supplies stuff, and like, I mean, they were big on like providing supplies. Basically, and some border protection, but they certainly weren't the main forces that went in and tried to conquer.
Well, they have
Jerusalem.
a big part in what is it? Is it a Third Crusade? What's the one where the Venetians shipped a bunch of Westerners to Constantinople to sack it? Is it the third
I think
crusade?
that's
the fourth, maybe?
the fourth.
Okay.
I think that's the fourth. The third is Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, and when all that.
Yeah,
stuff
you're
goes
right. You're
down.
right. Sorry. Yeah. I don't know if you guys don't know about it. Like that crusade is pretty funny. It's like the Crusaders got to Venice and they needed ships, but they didn't have the money, if I remember correctly, to pay for it. So the Venetians were like, okay, we're gonna ship you, but first you need to conquer these other places for us. And so they made the Crusaders attack other Christian cities to conquer, I think Ragusa or something, like a city in the Adriatic Sea, and then they shipped them to Constantinople, and then they sacked Constantinople, like pretty much destroying their Eastern Roman Empire, like fragmenting it. And then the Venetians just took all the loot and brought it back to Venice, and it's still there, a lot of it. And that's a very proud part of my heritage, because I am from Venice, and that part is always so fun. It's very like a whole crusade, but didn't actually even go to the Holy Land. It just attacked other Christians that we were supposed to protect.
There's a lot of that going on in the Crusades. A lot of, we're going to march to Jerusalem. Oh, hey, look, there are some Jews right here. Maybe we can just kill them instead, and shit like that. The Crusades are so messy, and that's part of what's delightful about studying them, is how chaotic they are. The First Crusade was actually relatively well organized. So I'm curious to see how all that plays out, bringing things back to the book in question.
And I think in this book it's a bit similar, because in the sense that everyone is on their own side. It's not like everyone has their own side, really. You're trying to get advantage for themselves, not for their whole side, really.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of selfishness going on.
Yeah.
So, Steve, I want to hear from you. What were things you noticed on this read? Obviously, non-spoilery. Like, what were things that stood out to you that you thought were interesting, compelling? Anything you want to highlight?
Non-spoilery would be, I love Bakker's action. I think sometimes I'm not a big fan of combat scenes that go on for like a chapter. Well, sometimes there are some books that do that pretty well. Like the Hellborn King has a whole chapter or two just of a battle, but it's broken up. So there's like different things that happen. There's different strategies involved. So not always true, but I think the battles that Bakker does is they're quick and they're violent and then they're over. And it leaves more of an impact than it being, he swings a sword and he blocks with a shield and then he swings, it's like, okay, get on with it, but they're just like really quick and brutal and people die and things happen. And then it leaves, as a reader, I think it's more impactful just to have it, to know that it's going to be quick. Because I think in life, I don't want to say like I've been in a life or death battle, but I would imagine that they're over pretty quick. I mean, unless it's like a large scale battle, if you're, two people are fighting, probably doesn't last, too long.
From what I know, I think they went actually quite a long time, but it was like, there's a clash, and then they separate, and then there's another clash. Right. It's not like constant action.
Right.
But probably the soldiers were there all day, but half the day was spent standing still or just walking, or just pushing against each other or something like that. Like the actual action, I think.
Yeah, really good.
Well, particularly like one-on-one fights definitely can be over quickly, right? But yeah, the things that drag them out is like when you grapple, because people get tired, like you said, Dan. Like it's a lot of just trying to outlast the other person, even, or get a lucky blow in. Especially if you're covered head to toe in armor, it takes a lot to get through that plate. I did enjoy Bakker's action too.
And I think Carl, you mentioned Nair's, the scene where he comes back for his revenge. The imagery in those few pages, the lightning and the thunder and the darkness, and it's very vivid. That very striking, that section.
Could I mention one more thing that I thought that stuck out to me? So what I highlighted this section, I think it was one of the last chapters in part 2, where Skeos is talking to Confus, and to me it's the opposite type of philosophy of going back to the Dunye. where they talk about only the future is real. Without a future, without a horizon of promise or threat, our lives have no meaning. Only the future is real confess, and unless I make amends to the gods, I have no future left. So I to me, that stuck out because it was in the opposite, going in the opposite kind of philosophy. And we know Bakker is a philosopher, so I don't know if others thought the same. That these people are very much, they're kind of like capitalists or whatever, but they're really focused on their, their wealth and their future and their anyway, I just found that to be interesting.
Definitely, the philosophizing are very interesting. I continue to be interested, and I ponder a lot the epigraphs. After I read them, I find that there's a lot of like interesting little nuggets of wisdom or ideas just to think about, even if I don't necessarily, think they're accurate. Like a lot in this part was about empires and being a king, and the gods too. I remember the one where one of like the greatest blasphemies, or the most honest blasphemies or something, was that call a god a thief, not a king, because unlike kings, you don't notice when a thief steals from you.
That was a good line.
And that's paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact quote, but I thought that was so interesting and such a kind of quietly profound way to view such a large idea. Certainly it's impactful to talk about religion and gods and things like that, and to grapple with the horrors in the world by viewing a god as a thief. It's just not a way I'd ever thought about it before, and I thought that was interesting.
I think you're right. I think there's the way he writes, especially these sort of passages which almost seem taken from the Old Testament sort of thing. They're very concise, yet there's a lot of things you can think about, and yet they're very well written, so there's a lot of stuff in it, right? And he feels purposely crafted, actually taking something from a bigger body of literature, which was, carefully crafted to be, important, not just I'm just writing some random thing which is supposed to sound smart, but it's actually doesn't mean anything, right?
I
which
find
can happen
myself,
sometimes.
Oh yeah, I find myself rereading paragraphs quite a bit. I don't know if I'm the only one, because I feel like I might have. There's a lot going on, as you said, Dan, and maybe I missed something.
Yeah. Sometimes they're too short. But maybe he could have explained things a bit longer, in more sentences. But it's very concise sometimes, and sometimes it's not. But.
What about you, Varsha? What stuck out to you in this part?
Oh, I thought that scene that Mike mentioned was very powerful. The one where Chaos, who we think is a scaredy cat, is willing to betray Sirius because he's afraid for his afterlife, sort of. He's worried about upsetting the gods by giving away the holy war, and that his mother's conspiring with Chaos probably. I also really appreciated the thing we were talking about earlier, which was the pulling the rug out from under our feet. In the introduction, for instance, the very first chapter in this part, we had Sirius, I think it starts, if I remember correctly, with Sirius admiring the sparrows and thinking about how wonderful they are and what a good addition to his day they are. And then one shits on him, and then he's like, no, kill all of them.
It was funny.
The way that turned was brilliant, and it sort of set the tone for pretty much everything else that happened in this part, right? We start one way and then it goes a completely different way. Another thing that I wanted to bring up for discussion was Maithanet. What you mentioned earlier, Carl, about how what happens with the Vulgar Crusade is basically told to us. It's almost like it's an excerpt from some historical text, right? And so it does feel distant and impersonal. we go from feeling like Maithanet is fumbling and has gotten himself into something bigger than he anticipated, to the way this section ends is Confess wondering what the heck Maithanet knows and who he is, and being absolutely terrified of him. He went from feeling really confident that he can steal the war from him, to wondering who this person is and that he doesn't fully understand. So I thought that bit was really well done, because we left part one with this feeling that Maithanet is this larger than life person, right? Who's calling a holy war. Everybody's coming to where he calls them. And like he's got like this huge crowds who are hanging on his every word. And he also recognized Akamian for a sorcerer when we don't expect him to. There's so much going on with this character that just felt so larger than life. And then we're like, oh, he's fumbling. Maybe he's not as cool as we thought. But then when we end it, Confess is like, oh my god, who the heck is he? By then we've gotten to really admiring Confess, and like I just love the whole, the groundwork that is laid to sort of really hammer in the impact of each little, I don't want to say revelation because nothing's being revealed yet, but like thought process that we're embarking on.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, like, the increasing sense that Maithanet is, that he knows too much, right? Like, how does he know all of this? How is he able to predict all? That's one of the reasons I find the Kellis theory, again, it could be completely insane. I who knows, and I'm not super attached to it. But why I find it compelling is just because, like, how does he begin to piece together the things that he's piecing together and, like, strategizing in ways that, like, all the other characters, kind of the top dog, like, schemers, we get a pretty strong sense of their humanity. And by that, I mean, like, their flaws, their inability to predict the future, their inability to successfully manipulate everything to their whims, and the only other characters who we've seen do the things that Maithanet seems to be doing, although who knows if he actually is like Kellis and Moingus. And I want to know what's going on there, and what is the humanity behind this figure. We only got like one real kind of quieter scene with him where he was very wrathful and angry and villainous, but not like, there wasn't any clear sense that he didn't know what he was doing, or that he was in really over his head. Like, you almost expect it because of how proud he seems, but at the same time, there's just this increasing sense, like you said, Varsha, that he knows so much, and that, he's frightening people who are not used to, well, I don't want to say that they're not used to being frightened, but he's impressing them, I guess, people who are not used to being impressed. And there's certainly a lot going on there. And clearly, we know he's a sorcerer, right? Or he has the mark or whatever, or he's able to see the mark, there's something there that he could pick out a Camian from the crowd. I'm very intrigued by Maithanet, and honestly, I really desperately want more with him, because we're just getting drip fed, really. We're just having a lot of people talk about him, which is probably really great writing to, like, continue to build that anticipation and the mystery around his character.
I think we know he's an exceptional person, right? Because I think we've been told that he rose to become the Shreya, like, very quickly from nothing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, he seems to be a very exceptional person.
I realized that I hadn't finished reading the final chapter for our last discussion. So one thing that I wanted to talk about today was the fact that the Maithanet is in league with the Consult, right? Like, that's what that chapter meant. No?
No, it's the knights who work under him who are. It doesn't seem like he knows about the Consult. Or if he's
Maybe.
aware of them, he doesn't realize that they've infiltrated. That's my
Maybe.
understanding.
Okay, we haven't been told explicitly that he's in league, but he's the head of the religious order whose god is in league with the consult, whose goddess is in league with the consult.
Wait, what?
Doesn't Indra think that the goddess has betrayed him?
Oh, I took that as like an emotional thing, like not like literally the god betrayed.
I read that
And-
literally.
Oh, fair enough.
I
I
mean-
mean, yeah, who knows what's going on with the gods in this
Are
world?
the gods
Yeah.
real?
Our God.
I don't think we've seen
Yeah.
anything like that. I think we've only seen magic being real, to be honest.
Yeah, I will
Yeah.
admit, and this may be my own personal worldview influencing things, but like with the Song of Ice and Fire, where people talk about the gods a lot, but we don't actually see like them actively. Like there are things that people interpret as the gods. I'm not convinced that the gods in this world are real yet, but who knows? Maybe they are. Maybe we'll see some crazy. I mean, we have the No God, right? Isn't that what he's called? He's clearly real because he's basically like he was Sauron and he came down and like almost took over the world. So we at least know that guy's real. Whatever, whatever's going on there.
Could be just a very
And
powerful
presumably
sorcerer,
they're-
right? Like
Right.
we've seen
But I mean,
sorcerers
certainly that
be
was-
very
yeah.
powerful, right?
Yes.
So think about like one of the most powerful sorcerer. How strong would he be, right, compared to normal people? I don't know.
Scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's scary.
I don't know if others noticed this, but part 2 was almost devoid of magic. I mean, there was maybe a little bit in contrast to.
Yeah, except for that battle.
Sorry.
Except for that battle between Sylvendi and Nansur.
Okay. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, the sorcerers came out and nuked everyone.
Well,
And then you had the weird face scene, but other than that, you're right. It
it's
is
not as
lighter on
much, I
magic.
should say. Probably another. Yeah. Need to maybe go back to that
So-
chapter.
Even part 1, we didn't see a lot of wielding of magic. We just talked about magic a lot because we were seeing things from a perspective of one of the members of a school, right?
I mean, we've heard a lot of talk about magic, right, and how it's viewed by the cultures and their religion, right? And it seems to be only reserved for like important things, and they're not just doing it to heat up their tea or something, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it does seem like even the sorcerers themselves know that they're sort of, because they're in this cultural environment, they do sort of also view it a bit as, it's not something good, right? So
Yeah.
you wouldn't use it trivially, right? Because they still see that it's like, that it's something, because of the culture they're in, it's bad, sort of, right? It's against God. Maybe they're like, I'll accept power in this life to go against God, but it's still, we still sort of know it's bad a bit.
So, new question about that battle in which they used sorcery. What did Confus do differently in this particular battle? Was it that he brought the sorcerers, or did they always fight with sorcerers, but they had the Korai, is that what they're called, in strategic places so that the sorcery couldn't be effective? Was it mainly strategy that won them this battle, or was it the fact that they had the sorcerers?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it seemed clear that he the big manipulation was he got everyone there. Like, all the tribes were there. And they were maybe funneled in. Like, I want to say they were, like, around mountains, so maybe they were, like, there wasn't as much room to maneuver. But, yeah, I don't know beyond that. You would think they would use the wizards.
I think it's explained, right, when Nair is in the river and is hearing Confus talking to Martimius, right? And he's explaining his strategy and what he did, right? He says, what do you say? He says, war is intellect, right? And he explains how what he did different than his predecessors was he stopped and he learned about the Slavendi, instead of previous ones thought they were barbarians. What he learned their patterns, the fact that they were rushed because they needed to go gather their herds because the winter was approaching, and he knew how they fought. He knew they had all their traditions, right? And he used all of that stuff to sort of lure them into, because usually they wouldn't be able to use the sorcerers because the Slavendi had Kore bowmen, so they would shoot the sorcerers, which are very important. You can't, like, losing, I think, a sorcerer is like losing 10,000 people or something like soldiers, something like that. So you can't just have the sorcerers in the front line attacking, because once they know where they are, they're just going to shoot them, or they're going to attack them, or, So he used it so that I think the strategy was he made them think that he put the strong forces on his flank, so they would put his, something like, what was it? The force of the flanks, he seeded the flanks, and he put his best force in the front. He attacked where they had the Kore, so they couldn't use it, and then when they were neutralized, he used the sorcerers. I think that's what happened. But the basic thing is the basic thing it was just like he stopped to think, which his predecessor didn't think. I think that's the main takeaway.
Right, he took the Skilvendi. Well, I guess they probably took him seriously, but he actually tried to understand them, right? As opposed to just treating them like this was the line that I thought was one of the lines, the epigraphs rather, that I thought was so interesting was, and in Old Shaic, the language of the ruling and religious castes of the Nansurium, Skilvenas means catastrophe or apocalypse, as though the Skilvendi have somehow transcended the roles of people in history and become a principle. That's actually quoting Acamian, one of his books on the Holy War. And I just think, one, that's so cool that I don't know if this has any sort of historical precedent or if Bakker just came up with that himself, but that this people were named in the language because they were so they were named for like disaster, like apocalypse. Like, that's crazy. Also, it made me wonder, there are lots of connection hints that maybe there's something going on between this Skilvendi and all the shit that went on up north, and the oh my god, why can I never remember their names? But the orcs, whatever the orcs are.
The Shrank, yeah.
The Shrank, yeah. I don't know. I distinctly remember. I would have to look it up and try to find it. I don't highlight anything. That there was some mention of like something about the Skilvendi having some connections to the north, or even doing things like, I don't know. Maybe I just projected that onto that, but I definitely wondered about some sort of connection between their culture and the Shrank, who seem to be very similar from what we understand. Beyond that, again, just that it's so cool that their culture is named after like a word for apocalypse, basically. And
maybe it's the other way around.
At the same time,
maybe it's the word for apocalypse came from the word for the people, right? Because of the cultural impact they had. I think that in my mind, that's a reference to the Huns and Attila, the Scourge of God sort of thing, because that also is something, that happened to the Eastern Roman Empire, and how these people were seen as like sort of like demons, right? Coming to destroy everything, and people from the steppes always seen as this sort of force that comes and destroy the civilized empire. And even in modern cultural sort of language, like the Huns in certain languages, European languages, it's just something, it's like a word for like the destroyers or something like that, right? It's to me, it's a bit of a parallel to that, as well as the stuff that you said.
There's definitely parallels there with the Huns, right? The steppe, like horseback riding. Yeah. I mean, again, getting back to the Dothraki, right? And then, anyway, looping back to the idea of like the word meaning they viewed them as a principle, right? They viewed them as a force of nature rather than as a civilization. And that was like seemed to be the big thing that Confus did, was actually view them as people who like have reasons for the things they do. And that allowed him to exploit those, reasons, kind of in the same way Kellis does, but on a more, militaristic scale.
That makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah.
Good
It
stuff.
is interesting how a lot of the time when you have people discussing books like this, and a lot of the time all these things, the psychology of a character, or is this foreshadowing to this, or is this mean that? A lot of the time it's just sort of like we're making it up, right? And there's nothing like that. It's all speculation. But this is one of the series in which like it's the opposite. It's sort of like you guys don't even know how you're just scratching the surface of the deeper meaning and the psychology and the characters, and it's a lot more too, on top of all the things you're thinking about also. So I think you'll enjoy that.
I think I'd use the word manipulation, but I think it's beyond that. I think it's this determinism stuff that's going on here. One thing that I kept thinking about as for the last maybe 10 minutes or so is I think the Dunyain could be anywhere. Actually, it sounds like they come out and do something. They make changes, or they as we were saying, it could be the Mathanet character, but it could be, to me, they could be posing as anybody. I'm wondering. It could be totally, it could be way off, but just the fact that we learned that the father was, I mean, maybe I didn't catch this, but he went by another name. He didn't go by this initially, I think. So it makes me think that anything is possible.
So, sorry, is the theory that Mathanet is one of the Dunyain, or that he came out of another sect of the Dunyain?
I mean,
because you said they could be anywhere, which is interesting. I had just assumed that they were, like, that was the last of them that settled in the city where the Anasurim board. But I mean, I guess certainly refugees scatter, so I guess they could have gone to other places.
I'm
too.
thinking that so what I'm saying is that Confus could be, you know what I mean? Like, it could be anybody. I mean, that's probably not a good example, but my assumption is that, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but these are people that whenever there's something is out of joint in this world, they can come in and then, maybe make some changes or pose as some other character to then, because they know what's going to happen.
Or they manipulate the people and nations, stuff like that.
Or guide, or it's on the tip of my tongue, another example of this from something I watched recently or what have you, but
that's sort of what the Bene Gesserit do.
Exactly.
Is like they try to steer the course of history towards ideally more order. I mean, they have all this propaganda. Really, it's because, it's to their own whims. Whatever they feel is moral.
Right.
Kind of in this same way to what, not even moral, what they think will benefit them, but kind of in the same way that, I don't want to get into Dune. Actually, I won't talk spoilers there.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an interesting idea.
I was thinking more instead of the example like the lizard people in our world. So that's what I was thinking. I don't not that I think the lizard people are real, but how they manipulate and they're hiding behind the important people, right?
We get it. Dan is a lizard person truther.
Could be.
That's interesting. Yeah, that the Dunya. I mean, I hadn't even thought that they. Who knows what's up with them?
Maybe the leader of the Scarlet Spires is
right.
One of them, or the leader of the I don't know, found him or the leader of the, who knows.
But now we know none of that is
It could
true
be
because
anywhere.
you wouldn't spoil it for us.
Or would I? Or would
Oh.
I?
Exactly.
Hiding in plain sight.
I'm furiously googling lizard people.
Yeah, I didn't catch that reference either.
You've never heard of a lizard people?
I don't think so.
There are people out there who really believe that stuff. It's a little crazy, yeah.
Yeah. They think that like
Nothing little
yeah.
about it.
all
Yeah,
the
it's true.
important politicians are just lizard people, and they're or aliens or something manipulating humanity, something like that, and they drink the blood of people. I don't know, just weird conspiracy theories. And they live inside the
weird.
center of the Earth, which is hollow, where the dinosaur lives,
Of course.
or something like that.
So is that a step up or a step down from the flat Earth theory? Because they live in the center, so the
Yeah.
Earth is not
Listen,
flat.
all I'm getting from this is the Dunyain live in the center of the earth, and that Kellis is in fact a lizard, and he's going to come out, and he's going to transform into a dragon, and
Oh, maybe.
game over.
You
They
don't
ride
know how much of it
dinosaurs.
is real.
Checkmate.
Yeah.
So the Dunyan do live underground. So who's to say the
Wait,
underground
what
doesn't
is-
go all the way to the center? But at least some part of them does. Right? Isn't that where we left them when the dreamers
The
woke
city's
up?
underground? I completely missed that. I thought the city was above ground. The city's underground?
I think it's underground too. It might. They're hidden.
I think
Is it
it was
both?
in
hidden in
caves,
some
I
way.
think.
They found
Caves.
they found each other in the unlit depths of the thousand halls. Depths.
yeah.
I interpreted that as underground, or maybe
They're
it
not in
says
plain
explicitly
sight.
somewhere else that it's underground.
Wow, I completely missed that. Okay, I'm glad you pointed that out. I had no idea.
So all we need is for Kellis to turn into a dragon and we're set.
Exactly, there you go. So my theory's halfway there. Okay.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
Well, we know, but you don't.
Yeah.
You guys know.
Fakers.
Soon.
Interesting.
Oh, I had another question for the rereaders. At what point in the first book, or maybe later in the series, if it's later in the series, maybe not, but in the first book, have we got to the point yet where you decided you really liked this book?
You mean on the first try? On the first read, you mean? Or
On the first read.
I was hooked pretty quick. I think the prologue hooked me. That was
Oh, interesting.
pretty... That's all in. What about you, Dan?
Don't remember. It was a very long time ago. I think I started reading it when the first book of a second series came out, or something like somewhere around there. But I don't remember. It's been a long time. But I believe when I read it the first time, I only read the first part. Because I think it wasn't out, like the second part wasn't out yet. And then when the second part came out, I reread everything. And then I reread everything when Steve had the discussion.
Oh,
Oh, interesting.
I
cool.
think. Yeah. Something like that.
I had a question
I don't know
for
where
Cool.
it's
So
like
you
it,
reread
but-
all seven. We reread all 7 books 4 or 5 times. That's awesome.
Something like that. I don't know. But it's... I don't know. The second series made me love the whole thing a lot more than just reading the first series. But that's not the same for everyone. Some people much prefer the first series. I don't know what Steve's opinion on this is. But...
I think the second series, there's some great stuff in the second part that kind of ties it all together. But I love both of them. So
Yeah. They're kind of different.
they are, yeah.
Fairly different. We can't say how or why.
What-
Yeah.
What I couldn't believe was, so I did read some interviews with him, and I got one small thing. I don't know if it's small or not. I'm not going to say it, but spoiled for me. But that he basically, like, I mean, he had like a whole outline, or not outline, I guess, but idea for the whole like series of series. And I guess it was originally supposed to be like a trilogy and then 2
As it
duologies.
happens.
Did he are the back 4 books, is that what those are, or is it just an expansion of the second?
I think the last 2 books were supposed to be 1 book, if I remember right. And I think there was supposed to be 2 trilogies, and I think they split the last 2 books into they split the last book into 2, so it turned out to be a 4 book.
Well, from what I've
Oh,
heard,
second
though, there's supposed to
Bad brilliant
be
approach.
something else after this. So there's
I heard
supposed to
that
be a
too.
last part. But I think the last
Okay.
time there was any, I don't know, the last time anyone heard from him was a while ago.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did take some steps to reach out to him through some people.
Oh,
so
awesome.
cross your fingers and your toes. I don't. It's a long shot, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
I mean, he's still fine.
That'd be
I think his brother said that he's like fine, he's just chilling and doing his own thing, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is hard to find a publisher. I think.
I don't see how. Jeez.
It's self-published. man.
I mean, it's not very. I don't know. Who would it publish? It's very specific, very niche.
Self-publish.
Yep.
Kickstart that.
He should.
I guess.
He would raise
Yeah, he
money like
should.
crazy.
He definitely would be able to
Kickstart
get
that
the money for that.
Maybe he just doesn't
But
find
you put in
motivation for it.
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. Is he? So what? Is he back in academia? I mean, has he even mentioned? Maybe he's just full private. I don't know. But
I think he's private. I don't think he's doing a whole lot. I think he's just focused on being a dad now. But
I think so.
fingers crossed.
Cool.
There was a rumor about a year ago that the next book was about to come out, and it turned out to be, I don't know what happened. It fizzled out, but there was some traction. So maybe there's something.
would you
going on.
say it ends solidly? Like if you never got another book,
Yes.
you would be content with where it ended?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's way better than some other certain authors who set out to write 7 books and,
Yeah.
anyway, before I get sad.
No, I think you'll be
stop
satisfied by
there.
the conclusion. Well, maybe not. It is
Well-
a conclusion of some sort. It depends. Some people like it, some people don't. But, I'm happy with it. To be honest, a lot
Yeah.
of people are happy just even reading the first 3 and keeping it at that. Like,
Oh.
you can read it in that way and then just be happy about that, really. Maybe skip the last
'Cause that
2
was the thing-
chapters of this trilogy.
That was the thing that like stood out to me was he talked about it as if it was like the first trilogy was almost like a prologue to the rest of the story, which I was like, whoa, because I did have some understanding that it was like self-contained as a trilogy, and then like the second story continued the story, but like it didn't, like you didn't need it per se, and so I was very curious. I mean, it just reminds me of the stuff that like Patrick Rothfuss said about the Kingkiller Chronicles, which is honestly hysterical at this point. That like I don't know if you guys have heard this, but like the Kingkiller Chronicle trilogy is supposed to be a prequel to a larger story.
Well, I've only read the first one,
Which is-
and there's not a lot that happens in that book.
It's comical, honestly. Like I like the book. We've talked about it in the forum, but anyway, I don't want to get off subject too much. But
I like
that
it.
like you finish the trilogy before you even think of a freaking.
I think it's different. Like that trilogy, it doesn't feel to me, at least, like he has an idea, a whole complete idea of how everything is gonna turn out. Like, while here, there's a lot of things which wouldn't be in these books if he didn't know how
Plotted it out.
it would turn out in the end. Like, there's a lot of
Okay.
anticipation of things and little things which don't make sense right now, or you can just read it normally but mean something else later. And I don't think you could do it just writing without knowing what's going to happen, I feel.
Yeah. If we don't get any other books, I'll be satisfied. I'm good if we don't get any more. Well, of course, I'd love some more, but so yeah, there's not like a. Yeah, I'll just say it's a. Yeah, yeah. So you're not going to be hanging on for something to be wrapped up. I guess you can say it's
It's not like a cliffhanger. or
there's a
anything
bookend.
like that,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah. Okay.
Final answer.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess unless anyone else has anything else to talk about, now seems like a good time to wrap up. So where can people find you, your books, and your channels, and any other content that you create? Steve, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, you can find me on PageChewing.com. That's the best place to find me. All the stuff's there. So quick and easy. I'll kick it off to Dan because Dan's a tough one. He has a long outro.
No, not really. You can find me. Where can you find me this time? You can find me on some obscure cartography forums for fantasy maps if you're looking for it. And maybe you'll see some maps I posted every once in a while in the past.
Oh, wow.
Who knows?
cool.
Who knows?
What? Okay, you can't just say that. Where is this now? I want to see. I
No,
love
no,
fantasy
it's
maps. What?
obscure. It's obscure. If I tell it, it's not obscure. Actually, I don't know how obscure it is. It's just what is it called? Cartographers Guild?
Well, why don't you
It's
share
been a
on
while.
our
It's
obscure
been a while since I posted about there, but
share the obscure cartography forum on our obscure forum, and it'll remain obscure.
okay,
How about
it's
that?
pretty good.
Sounds like a plan.
I just remembered it because it's the only website which sends me every year birthday wishes. Even if it's been many years since I posted there, they still the only one they get birthday wishes from.
Oh, okay.
That's so funny.
Challenge accepted. All right.
Anyways, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, you can find me on the PageChewing forum, or I am at Carl D. Albert pretty much on most social media sites. And then my books, the ebook is on Amazon, and the physical book you can buy wherever books are sold.
Yes, and join our read for it here in the next month or so. We'll be reading it together. So.
Woo.
And for me, you can find me on pagechewing.com as well. I go by Mike M with the last initial.
Nice.
It's getting late for me. Sorry, it's like
It's okay. It's all right.
it's after my bedtime.
That leaves me, right? Yeah, you can find me on the channel you're reading by the Rainy Mountain. The About page has other ways to reach me. And I, of course, hang out all the time on the PageChewing forum. So we'll see everyone in 2 weeks when we'll be discussing part 3, which is only 3 chapters this time, but still about 100 pages. So chapters 9 to 11. I made the exact same mistake yesterday, but anyway, 3 chapters, 2 weeks from now. See everyone. Thank you so much for listening if you're still here with us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.